What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Injury Half Hour with Dr. A from InsideInjuries.com, where we are going to give you the latest injury news on everything, help you out with your fantasy teams, help you out with the betting spreads, let you know who to pick on. You get it all here from a beloved and trained doctor himself. Dr. A, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm pretty excited about this NBA finals. I think it's got a lot of buzz. It doesn't have the Celtics, Lakers pizzazz, but it's really, really intense, and so I'm pretty excited about the whole thing.
Yeah, me too, and that's exactly where I wanted to get started talking about. I think it is obviously the biggest story in sports right now, the NBA Finals between the Golden State Warriors and the Toronto Raptors. And Dr. A, after Game 2 when the Warriors pulled out that victory, Klay Thompson said to Drake, "I'll see you in the Bay, Aubrey." But my question is, we know he hurt his hamstring in Game 2. How likely is it that we do in fact see Klay Thompson playing in the Bay in Game 3?
Okay, so obviously the most important thing, which we don't know the results of yet, is the MRI that he underwent on Monday, okay? It's Tuesday. They know the results, and so we don't know the results yet. But based on the way he injured it and based on all of the information that we could gather from the algorithm and all of our sort of sources, we've labeled this as a grade 1 hamstring injury, which is, grade 2 is a significant strain. Grade 1 is kind of a mild strain, so that's good. Normally, grade 1 hamstring injury during the regular season, because they have the time, the optimal recovery time here is 3 weeks. And that would be obviously, very detrimental to the Warriors. And he's not going to stay out for 3 weeks. But that is just to give everybody a perspective of how long this injury actually takes to heal and to rehab it and to get going. So he is going to put himself at risk. And one of the things that, all of the fans and the fantasy players and the gamers and the gamblers need to know is that when you put an existing injury at risk, there's two big things that become an issue. One is a re-injury of that original hamstring, and that will make it really a lot worse and possibly get to a grade 2 or grade 3. So that's one risk. But the second risk is another type of injury because of a compensatory type of force that, sort of avoiding that hamstring, that calf or the opposite ankle, will start to potentially be at risk as well. So he's optimistic that he can play Game 3. I don't know if he is 100% that he's going to play in Game 3. The wise thing would do from a medical standpoint is to rest him in Game 3, knowing that they will definitely need his services in Game 4, and that's at least giving him a little bit more rest.
So there you go, guys. And Dr. A is saying that this is, if it was the regular season, there'd be no chance of Klay really suiting up. That from the sounds of it, at least that's my takeaway from what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that meaning that even if Klay plays, he is not going to be at 100%. And all of you guys listening can head over to InsideInjuries.com where they break down what the injuries the effect it should have on the spread. And right now, the spread is, as of right now, Tuesday afternoon, the spread is Warriors minus 5.5. But, Doc, you guys at Inside Injuries are saying that it should only be minus 3, meaning that the Raptors are getting an extra 2.5 points. So, right now, if people are out there and they're looking to place one of their wagers, you're saying hammer the Toronto Raptors on this side, right?
Yes, absolutely. The biggest thing here is that the injuries, especially in a one game, or in a 7-game series, can really, really be detrimental, especially when they affect the key players on the team. The spread is minus 5.5, and based on all of the injury analysis that we've done on all of these players that we're going to talk about very soon, with Kevin Durant and DeMarcus Cousins coming back, whether or not he's good or not, and then there's a couple of other injuries as well, on some key role players. All goes into this algorithm, and what a lot of people don't know is the fact that the spread does take into account from Vegas some injury information, but not the extent of the a significant amount of algorithmic calculations that we do on every single player of every single team of their all of their history of injuries, etc. So this is the most up-to-date spread when we apply all of our injury analytics to it. And what our spread is saying is that the Warriors, because of all these injuries, are not going to be able to. It'll be very difficult for them to cover the 5.5 point spread, and it's more like covering like a 3 point spread. That is what our algorithm is saying. It's not saying that the Raptors are going to win. It's basically saying that there's a higher chance for the Warriors not to cover at 5.5. And so, yes, to hammer the Raptors, to bet against the spread, that is what we would potentially suggest, because that's what the statistics are showing.
And guys, I could tell you, if Klay Thompson gets ruled out for Game 3, or if we know he's on a minutes limit, this spread is going to change. So I would listen to Dr. A right now. I'd go wherever you place your bets, and I would start hammering the Toronto Raptors, because the Warriors are just extremely, extremely banged up right now. And Dr. A, Kevin Durant has already been ruled out for Game 3, meaning that if he was to return, the most we're going to see him again, maybe ever, as a Warrior, is 4 games. Is he, with this calf strain, is he going to step back in and instantly become Kevin Durant of old, or is it going to take him a couple games to get back to himself, or are we just not going to see typical Kevin Durant again this series, even if he does return to action?
So I'm going to make a bold prediction, Michael. Are you ready?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm ready.
Kevin Durant will not come back in the finals. He will
At
not.
all.
He will be on the bench, because that is the wise thing to do. The original injury likely was a grade 3. We listed it as a grade 2, which is a moderate sprain, but a grade 3 is a partial tear. We strongly believe at Inside Injuries, based on all of the stuff that we've looked at and all of the sources and all of our data, that he did suffer a small tear within his calf, elevating him to a grade 3 calf strain. And that normally takes 8 weeks to return from. And there's no reason for him to be on the court, because, man, if you re-aggravate that calf, we're talking about a significant amount of recovery time. And so, it's not just about winning a championship. You know how, Michael, all these guys have everybody in their ear, right? They're looking at their longevity, looking at their contract, they're looking at what they're going to do next year, or they're looking about the player safety and, his longevity in the game. And so the wise thing to do from a medical standpoint is to rest him, and he does not play in the finals. I mean, it's bad news for Warriors fans, but I'm just telling you that be very, very not surprised if he just doesn't suit up and play in any of these matchups, essentially, because he will be significantly hampered, and he's putting himself at increased risk, and not just for a re-injury of that calf, but again, a compensatory injury. And one of the most common compensatory injuries that a player can suffer with a calf strain is the opposite side ankle. And so knowing that and knowing the data, don't be surprised that if he doesn't come back for the rest of the finals.
That would be pretty shocking, at least from what the Warriors have said. I'm not doubting you at all, Dr. A. The Warriors, from the start, have been very optimistic. I think too optimistic. And as someone, I'll be very honest, I'm a Knicks fan, hoping that they end up signing Kevin Durant. So I hope you're right, Dr. A, and they don't jeopardize his health at all.
Yes. Because free agency, I mean, I'm telling you, if he plays in the finals and he re-aggravates that calf, and now he's got a lengthy recovery through the offseason, his stock, even though it'd still be very high, it won't be the same if he didn't get that injury. And it's just, that's the way the game is, the business of the game, etc. All of this stuff takes into, it has to be considered, because that's just what the modern player is, especially the talent level that Durant has. He has earning potential for a long period of time, and to put that in jeopardy, is something that in this day and age can be very questionable. Not only, and in addition to the medical reasoning, this type of calf injury takes 8 weeks to recover from normally. And so they're talking about, he got injured on May the 8th. Okay. So 2 months would make it July the 8th. So he would be coming back theoretically 1 month ahead of schedule for this type of healing process. So it's just a very, very slippery slope and very tricky. And if he's on the court, he may only play, maybe acting as a decoy, maybe playing, a few minutes here and there. I don't know how helpful he'll be, even though if he's Kevin Durant, when he's on the court and not at full strength.
Yeah, so Kevin Durant has an injury that should take 8 weeks. Klay Thompson, you just said should take 3 weeks, and even though you don't expect him to play in this next game, the Warriors are very banged up, and I think they're more vulnerable than they've ever been in this title run. But they did have another one of their superstars return this series, and in Game 1, DeMarcus Cousins looked atrocious. He played just 8 minutes, had 3 points. He was just the joke on Twitter, everyone talking about how out of shape he is and how awful Boogie Cousins was playing. And he shut everyone up in Game 2, playing 28 minutes, going from 8 to 28 minutes, scoring 11 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. He was a huge difference maker in that game. My question, Doc, is, one, did they push him too much in Game 2, going from 8 to 28 minutes? And two, are we going to see DeMarcus Cousins healthy enough and his play at a high enough quality to really make up for the loss of Kevin Durant and a healthy Klay Thompson?
Yeah, so DeMarcus Cousins did have a very good, much better Game 2 than obviously Game 1. And you remember that old adage where nothing prepares you until you're in the game, right? And so no matter how much rehab he did, no matter how much practice he did to try to get back into Game 1, until you're in game and the game speed, you're going to need a game to get back into it. And that showed in Game 1 versus Game 2. Here's the difference. In Game 2, he had Klay Thompson. Okay, even though he injured the hamstring in Game 2, at least a good portion of the game, he had Klay Thompson. Now, if Klay's not in and Kevin Durant's not in, he becomes a target. DeMarcus Cousins becomes a target with that torn left quad. He is still playing. I'm almost certain of it. He's playing still through a recovering quad injury, meaning he's getting pain management. The trainers and the medical staff are doing everything they possibly can, but there is no way that he's recovered from a grade 3 torn left quad. I mean, right now it was projected, that he would come back and under our sort of algorithm by the end of June. So he's still 3 to 4 weeks before that recovery period. And his history, and his torn left Achilles. He probably has a significant amount of injury to his other Achilles. The way he plays, if there is attention given to him from a defensive standpoint because Klay's not in, he's going to have a very difficult time because of this particular injury. And the biggest problem with DeMarcus Cousins has been his durability and to be able to play a full season as he gets older. So even though he had a good Game 2, the durability of this quad and not having compensatory injury, Game 3 will be a very, very high risk of certain injury, or it'll just be so impactful that he won't be very useful in that regard. That is what our algorithm is showing. And that actually was one of the significant contributors to the spread adjustment that we did, based on the fact that Klay Thompson is not going to be playing, Kevin Durant's not going to be playing, and that DeMarcus Cousins, the third game back, his quad and any other type of injury based on his high injury risk is not going to allow him to really be a significant force in Game 3 for the Warriors.
And that's why I was surprised they pushed his minutes so much. And I am no doctor by any stretch, but I have eyes, and I can tell you he's not in basketball shape. Just You see him in the fourth quarter with his mouth wide open, breathing heavily. That jump ball he had with Kawhi, where he clearly cheated because he knew there was no other way he was gonna.
I did see that play. Yeah, I did see that play. Yes.
He just does not look like himself. And Doc, before we wrap up on the NBA, I do want to ask you, for those out there wondering, I know Game 3 we said the spread hammered the Raptors, but given how banged up all the Warriors are, and you don't really seem optimistic, would you be betting on the Raptors more to win the series right now, or do you still think the Warriors ultimately will pull it out?
I think that based on now, this is out of my total expertise, right? Because I'm only talking about injuries, so I'm giving you that disclaimer, okay? I think the Raptors have a really, really good shot here to capture the NBA title. It doesn't happen very often. When you pit both teams together from a talent standpoint, Warriors are so much better from a talent standpoint. But with all of the injuries that the Warriors have, this is the chance for the Raptors even though Kawhi Leonard is at elevated injury risk because of his previous injuries, their players have so much better injury metrics and injury scores in our database that this is the chance that they have to capture the NBA title, and I think they have a good shot.
There you go. And again, you guys could head over to InsideInjuries.com, and throughout the whole series, Inside Injuries not only giving you what the Vegas spread is, but they're giving you what their injury algorithm believes it should be, and giving you that advantage there. Because like Dr. Ray said earlier, Vegas factors in the injuries, but they can't factor it in like a doctor himself can, like Dr. Ray. That's why you need to head over to Inside Injuries and really just make a profit using their expertise to help you and help you place your wagers. But Dr.
and all of the millions of data points that our data scientists and all those guys. I'm only one doctor, but these guys do a great job. All the data scientists and the algorithm makers at Inside Injuries. They're the real celebrities. I just talk good on radio.
You do more than that, Dr. Ray. But I want to move over to the baseball diamond because I know we say it every year, but it feels like this year there are a ton of injuries, and especially to key players that fantasy owners have been banking on, used an early round pick to get a lot of these guys. And the first one I want to start with is Jose Altuve, because we saw him last year in the playoffs and down the stretch, really. Altuve landed on the DL, it still was back then, last summer, and then throughout the rest of the season just wasn't himself. A lot of people were scared to invest in him in fantasy, believing that his knee would be an issue, and it wasn't the knee that landed him on the IL this year, it was his hamstring. But then he recovered from that, and while playing in some rehab games, he re-injured his knee, and now they're saying he needs to strengthen his lower body before he can return. Dr. A, Jose Altuve, when he is healthy, is a league winner. But can those who invested in an early round pick and thought he would be okay this year, are we going to see that league winning Jose Altuve back, or is this knee just going to be a chronic problem for him the rest of the way?
Yeah, I mean, his body type and this type of sort of player that Altuve is, he's like this scrappy, always around, always doing things. He's wiry. He's running. He's stealing bases. He's making double plays. He's diving. He's a very, very aggressive player, right? The second base and the shortstop position in baseball, you require these types of players. But the problem with these types of players, even though they can be amazing and they can be everywhere at the same time, they tend to get banged up quite a bit over the course of their careers. And Altuve is no stranger to that. And if you remember, he had a massive surgery in October. This is a patellar avulsion fracture, which is the patellar tendon essentially was stretched and it pulled off a piece of bone from the patella, basically.
I'm no doctor, but I can tell you that sounds very painful.
Yeah, it is the number one thing in your body that extends your knee is the patellar tendon. I mean, that is it. All that is it. And when you pull off a piece of bone and that patellar tendon is flailing in the wind and it has nothing to attach to, that it has to be repaired, has to be healed, has to go through a significant amount of rehab to make sure that it's solid and tight, because the full contraction and the weight of the lower extremity and all the quads and everything are pulling to make sure that knee can extend. So I'm just giving everyone a perspective of how massive this injury is and how the recovery is. So he recovered from that. Okay. And, and what typically happens on the right side, and this is the perfect example of a compensatory injury on the left side. On May 10th, the left hamstring injury. And then what happens? He recovers from that, and he has another compensatory injury on his surgically repaired right knee. It's because of the different mechanics and the forces, and I can almost guarantee you, and which is rightfully so, these medical staffs and these trainers are doing a great job. What they do, their methodology is, look, if you're going to injure one side, we're going to make the other side stronger, and we're going to make the muscles around it stronger so it can help support the injury. The problem with that is there's not really a problem with that except for the fact that there's a risk there. And the risk is that mentally as a player, you're not going to play with the same type of force and intensity on that particular knee. That knee is in his brain now. That is a massive injury that he had to come back from. So what happens? You subconsciously, you start to compensate on another extremity. And that's exactly what happens. And it gets worse as you get older. And if you're in a position where you're moving around and diving and running all over the place and stealing bases and getting hit by pitches and, all of these things. I mean, you're not a first baseman. You're not just standing, I'm not give all the respect to first basemen. I love first basemen, but they don't move around like shortstops and second basemen do, And so that's the problem. And so this is going to be the beginning of multiple extended problematic lengthy stints on the IL for the rest of the season. Our suggestion at Inside Injuries, if we were advising the Astros, is that you shut him down, and you shut him down for a good month and a half to make sure that he gets the right recovery that he needs so you can bring him back for when it counts later on in the season.
Yeah, and we know a team like the Astros, they have World Series aspirations. They're trying to take it back, as they always say on Twitter, but for those of you who invested heavily in Jose Altuve in fantasy, you hearing that from Dr. A that was the worst case scenario you could have heard, that this is going to be a continuing issue, and the way for it not to be is to shut him down for 6 weeks. Fantasy owners, we don't have 6 weeks, so I would say if you're a fantasy owner right now, I don't think you could trade him because his value right now is the lowest it's ever going to be. I think, though, you kind of got to wait till he gets back. And when he was playing before he went down this year, he wasn't stealing bases. He only had the one stolen base, but he had 9 home runs. So I think you wait for him to get on a little bit of a hot streak. Like we saw him hit a bunch of home runs in 1 week earlier this year. I think you wait for another stretch like that for when he gets healthy, and then you try and trade him. Because like Dr. Ray said, this is going to be a risk of him landing on the IL all year long. So you don't want to deal with that. You don't want to wait all this time, get him back, and a couple weeks later you're back exactly where we are today. I think once he comes back, that is when people start to get excited about a player. They're constantly in the news. You're seeing them constantly on your Twitter feed. That is when the hype is at its highest. That is when I would try shopping Jose Altuve, trying either when he's returning or once he hits his first hot streak before going back on the IL, because we were scared coming into the year, and from right after what Dr. A said, I'm even more scared today than I was back in March drafting Jose Altuve. But Dr. A, he is not the only big player that is hurt. In fact, the exact opposite of what Jose Altuve is exactly what Aaron Judge is. And Aaron Judge himself has hit the IL with an oblique injury. He got hurt. He hit the IL on April 21st after leaving a game on April 20th with the oblique injury. And Doc, whenever I hear oblique and a hitter, especially a power hitter such as Aaron Judge, I just start to get scared. I start shaking. And fantasy owners have been waiting for a while. Like I said, it's been since the end of April that Judge has been out. When can we expect him to return? And knowing that this is an oblique injury and those are so scary for power hitters, do you expect Aaron Judge to be Aaron Judge again this year?
Yeah, I mean, not only is he a power hitter, but he's also 6'8". Right? So his oblique muscle is probably the size of you and me, Michael.
Probably bigger.
Right, exactly. So if he strains that thing, it's just bigger muscles, take longer to heal, especially for power. Yeah, obliques are incredibly useful from a power standpoint with the hip turn. And, I mean, you're using a lot of those muscles from a batting motion, et cetera. And if you look at his batting stance and the way he swings, he uses all of his body, including his core and his obliques, et cetera. So the Yankees taking their time and making sure that this thing is completely healed is a great move. I applaud it. I mean, this is their guy. They're not going to bring him back. They have the luxury, though, of being in first place, and their team is playing really well. So that's a great sign. So they have the luxury of doing that. Obviously, that goes into it. The other thing that you have to worry about is the fact that in the outfield, running and catching fly balls and catching catching up to line drives and, looking, trying to track down plays at the warning track and at the wall, requires a significant amount of core work. And the oblique also is going to be important in that regard. So he's got, the fact that he's big and, that muscle is going to take a while and will affect, his ability to hit home runs, which, that's what he's there for. Besides just hitting, singles, the Yankees are looking at him to hit home runs. He has to have this thing completely, completely recovered in order for him to really hit home runs consistently. So, it's probably a grade 2 oblique strain. We didn't list it as a grade 3 because we did not think that it had a tear to his oblique. So this is a moderate strain his oblique. Typically it takes 6 weeks to recover from this, but given the fact that he's Aaron Judge and he's a very expensive player and the Yankees are in first place, there is no surprise that this will probably take more like 10 weeks for him to get back. And so, end of June is probably on the horizon for him to come back. Took swings in the batting cage over the weekend, ramped up his rehab, so he's looking like he's about 2 to 3 weeks away to really get back on the field. So I would, if you would ask Inside Injuries right now, we're projecting June the 28th.
Okay, and once Aaron Judge returns, do you expect this to be an issue going forward again, or do you think that it'll be behind him and June 28th on, he is going to be Aaron Judge?
Well, anything could happen at any time, but because of the fact that they gave him this amount of time to recover from this should pay off, for the rest of the season. Statistically, he should not, re-injure this oblique for the rest of the year.
And that you love to hear as an Aaron Judge owner. I know it's been painful. You didn't have him all of May. You might not have him for most of June, but this is why you drafted Aaron Judge in the first round. When he's healthy, he can hit home runs with the best of them. He is going to give you a solid average, a ton of RBIs. If you have Aaron Judge, just continue to hold out a little bit longer. He's coming, he's nearing, and he is going to be Aaron Judge of old when he is back. But Doc, one more question on Aaron Judge before we move on. And you always hear the term injury prone thrown around, and in my head, I tend to use it when a player keeps injuring the same body part. But I know that when, if you injure one, like you said with Altuve, you injure one knee, you need to strengthen the other side of your body. So Aaron Judge has now had an oblique injury, he's had a wrist injury, he's had a shoulder injury. Are those all connected, and is he injury prone, or has he just been very unlucky in the injury department?
Yeah, I mean, injury prone is a broad and huge stroke, right? Like it could be, there are guys that are called injury prone that pick up these ticky-tack little injuries all the time. And then there are guys that are injury prone that have a season-ending injury every year, right? And so it could be one or other, so Aaron Judge, if you do want to call him injury prone, yes, he is injury prone. Just by the sheer size of him, he's going to have injuries. You cannot, it's abnormal to be 6'8" and playing baseball and to playing it at the level that he plays at. He's an amazing, sort of phenom there. But over time in a 162 game season and, multiple seasons and the wear and tear of the game, the 6'8" guy is going to be injury prone, and that's basically what that means. But will he have these ticky-tack injuries? That's what we are projecting. Will he have season-ending injuries year after year? Probably not as much. Usually these big guys are injury prone because they have these, minor injuries that kind of keep them out for a week or two at a time.
Yeah, and those can be frustrating, but let me tell you, I'd much rather hear that he might miss a couple days here or a week or two here than he is going to every year he's going to suffer a severe injury and miss half the year. That is the type of injury-prone player you want to stay away from. And before we wrap up on baseball, Dr. A, the big story right now is the draft, was last night, or at least started last night, which means that Dallas Keuchel and Craig Kimbrell can now sign without that draft pick attached to them. We're hearing a ton of rumors about these guys. I've had each of them stashed away in some fantasy baseball leagues, and for those of us who are waiting on these pitchers, we've been stashing them. Can we expect them to, once they sign, kind of debut for their new team and instantly be themselves, or does this put them at a higher injury risk because they've missed the first 2 months of the year, and as much as they can be throwing on the side, it's hard to replicate game reps?
Yes, that's exactly right. I'm very concerned about a player that has not played in a few months and then tries to come back. He can never come out of the gate, and if he does really strongly, then he has a significantly high risk of injury. I would wait for a week or two to see how they're doing, and then start to make moves or action on them, and not if they're doing good. If they just don't get injured, if they're playing average, but they didn't get injured, then I would try to go after them because they've shown that when you past the first 2 weeks and they don't get injured, that's a good sign that from an injury risk standpoint, they're safe, so that you have a good statistical chance of picking them up. And for them, now that they are in baseball shape, they can do some things for you on the fantasy side.
And is it different for a player like Craig Kimbrell compared to Dallas Keuchel? Because Kimbrell is going to come in, get 3 outs, maybe throw 20 to 30 pitches, whereas Dallas Keuchel is going to be asked to, give depth, probably early on go like 5 innings, but still have to really exert himself a lot more than a relief pitcher like Kimbrell would. So are these two, would you be practicing caution with both of them, or is it a little bit more in Keuchel's case because of the roles?
Yeah, definitely more in Keuchel's case. Starting pitchers are always more banged up than closers, just by, like you said, the sheer number of innings and pitches that they have to do.
That makes a lot of sense. And from a fantasy standpoint, I've been stashing Dallas Keuchel in, I think, 2 leagues of mine. And my approach, even before hearing this from Dr. A, but now that cemented it, was going to be the first week he's back, I'm not going to start him. There could be a lot of rust there. You don't want to blow up your ERAs and your whips. And to me, I'd rather see Dallas Keuchel a start or two before getting him in my lineup. As for Kimbrell, if he signs with a team and they say they're letting him be the closer right away, even hearing what Dr. A just said about it being more cautious with Keuchel, if Kimbrell is picking up saves right away, I would throw him in my lineup because saves are so hard to come by. But if his team wants to ease him in and use him in a setup role early on, then that's what I would do, because if he's not giving me saves, he's not worth the potential risk of hurting my ERA and whip, because like Dr. A was saying, he could get injured again. He could be a little bit rusty. So I would play it that way with those two guys. And Dr. A, we wouldn't be, a sports show if we don't talk football. Fantasy football and just the NFL is a year-round grind, and there is no shortage of injury news right now, Dr. A. And the biggest story in the NFL has to be Todd Gurley's knee. It feels like every day a new report is coming out. We've heard that he is not going to be really used at all in the preseason. There's rumors that he has arthritis in his knee, and again, the Rams, as much as they want to say, he's okay and we have a plan that's going to work for him, they did pick up Malcolm Brown's contract. They did draft Henderson, traded up and drafted Henderson in the third round. So those are two talented running backs they have behind Gurley. They're saying, they're still going to use Gurley a lot, but the days of him being a workhorse may be over. Feels like every day there's a new Todd Gurley report, and feels like almost all of them are negative. So I know we're looking ahead. It's a few months away. Things are going to change. But right now, a lot of people are starting with best ball drafts and everything, Dr. A. So how worried about Todd Gurley are you? And should we be lowering him out of the first round?
Yes. Everything you said is yes. You hit it, right on the head. So Todd Gurley, great running back, but if you look at the statistics of longevity of running backs in the NFL, he is right at that peak now, right? I mean, it all started with his torn ACL in college, University of Georgia Bulldogs are my team, and so I knew that. I had studied it, I saw it directly, and so when you repair the ACL, that's great. But one of the things that happens over the wear and tear, torn ACL knees that are repaired suffer from early stages of cartilage loss, quicker than the normal knee that does not suffer the ACL tear. So not a lot of people know that. So there's a little bit of an acceleration of arthritis in that knee. And I can almost guarantee you that is what all the MRIs are showing. His medical staff is evaluating him, and that's why he is not going to be the main carrier of the team moving forward, because they just know that if they do that, he'll only play 30 to 40% of the games, and he'll be injured pretty much 70% of the season. So this is a great move by the Rams, knowing that early, and now sort of adjusting his role so that he can play lighter, move faster, and sort of move forward in that regard. So what does that mean for fantasy? He's just not going to have enough carries, for him to be a first rounder.
Yeah, and it's something we've started to see in recent drafts. I know It was a couple weeks ago, I was up in the first round, and I was debating if I should take Gurley or not. It was the end of the first round, and I ended up taking James Conner over him. And now looking back, I would do that again. We're starting to see Todd Gurley slide into the second round, and I think come August, if we're not seeing him all preseason, and we're going to see, Henderson and Malcolm Brown and these guys, if they're getting the run with the Rams and playing well, I think Todd Gurley might slide as far as the third round, maybe even later if we don't see him at all, because there's, like Dr. Ray said, there's a lot to be afraid of, and you're hearing it from a doctor himself. So, and especially, I thought you made a great point, Dr. Ray, that the Rams, this is a team with long term. They were just in the Super Bowl last year, and they're hoping to get back. And us fantasy owners, yeah, we may want them to give Todd Gurley 250 carries in the first 16 weeks, but they're not worried about the first 16 weeks. They're worried about the 6 or 7 weeks that come after that, playing through till February. So I am 100% in agreement with you. And it hurts me to say because I've long been a Todd Gurley fan. The last few years I've had him, it's been very fun, but the case being made for him still going high is that even with less touches, he could be a more efficient runner. I don't know if I trust that if his knee is acting up, and plus the fact that he had less touches in the playoffs last year, and he wasn't a more effective runner. So, yeah, I'm with you, Dr. Ray. I can't see taking him in the first round. Definitely more, as of right now, as a second, maybe even the third round pick as we get closer to August and see more. But he is not the only concern in the NFL. Cam Newton last year, his season ended early, and it hurt me as a Cam Newton owner to not be able to use him in Week 16 of the championship football games. But his shoulder, he's only started this past week, I believe, throwing a regulated size football. It's only June, still got a couple months before the games start to matter. Is Cam Newton's shoulder going to be okay, or is this going to not only affect him throwing, but also affect him as a runner?
So let's talk about the throwing for a second. The statement when he underwent arthroscopic surgery in January after the massive shoulder repair that he underwent at the end of the second half of the season was cartilage damage was not as extensive as we'd feared. Okay, so let's break that statement down because this is what our algorithm does. Cartilage damage, regardless of whatever comes after that, that's a bad sign. Okay, so the very fact that you're supposed to have a 5-star arm with Cam Newton, and the fact that he has cartilage damage in that arm, in that shoulder, is going to be a problem. His velocity will be down, his extent will be, his ability to throw longer will be down, the sort of quickness on the throws to throw a lot in a game will be down. Everything is a problem with that. Now, cartilage damage was not as extensive as we'd feared. So there's already an expectation that it's going to be pretty bad, but it's not as bad as we feared, right? So, Mike, do you understand this statement? It is really interesting when they made that statement. So this is his throwing shoulder. This is a guy that when at his prime, he could throw anyway. He could throw 80-yard pass on the run, basically. He could throw, across his body just like he was throwing on the same side of the field. So for him to have this type of problem during his follow-up arthroscopic surgery in January is a really, really bad sign from a throwing standpoint. So what does that mean? A lot more shorter passes, a lot more, probably play action, a lot more screens, a lot more, a lot of these things to get him running. His running game is probably going to increase this season. But at the end of the day, how many first downs and how many touchdowns and how many throwing touchdowns is he's going to make and how many interceptions will he have? His interception rate will be higher just because of this cartilage damage itself. And so Cam Newton, just like Todd Gurley, unfortunately, I would not put him and take him in the first round.
Yeah, and Cam Newton, I'm hearing the shoulder injury. I'm very nervous because, like Doc said, it's going to affect the throwing. And Cam Newton is the velocity. When you said velocity, Doc, that my ears perked up because when you watch Cam Newton play, he is a quarterback who relies on that arm strength. He takes a lot of shots deep downfield. He's not afraid to throw into tight windows. but he's never been an accurate quarterback. I understand last year, 67.9% completion percentage. That was amazing. But the 4 years below that, he was below 60%, and he had never been above 62% in his career before last year. So he is not a guy who relies on pinpoint accuracy. He relies more on his arm strength. Plus, if there's concern there, they ask him to stop running as much. So I'm with Dr. A right now. It's too scary for me to invest in Cam Newton, especially given how deep the quarterback position is and the amount of talented arms going around where he is going. I cannot back right now taking that unnecessary risk on Cam Newton because you're not getting a huge discount on him, at least not in early drafts. So I'm with you, Doc. I would be avoiding Cam Newton. And I just want to tell everyone listening before we say goodbye that if you want to, you want to know all fantasy football season long, if you should trust your players, if you should trade them, if you should drop them due to the injuries, or if you want to place your bets on the game and you want to football more than any sport, the injury report is so important. If you want to know how all these injuries are going to affect the spread, Inside Injuries has you covered, and you could just go there and they give you what the Vegas spread is and what it should be given all the injury news. And it's not just Dr. A, like he said, he's a huge team of very, very talented people, all way smarter than me, who could help you out. And I always say this, the numbers, there's more information out there available to anyone than ever. Where the unknown of fantasy sports and sports gambling is with the injuries a lot of the time. So Dr. A is and Inside Injuries are a great tool to help you, cover that unknown and really teach yourself on how this may impact the game. And then you also have the numbers that you already know how to use. So just become a better fantasy player, a better gambler, and head over to InsideInjuries.com. And that's where Dr. A and his great team will give you everything you need to know.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And yes, not only the injury-adjusted spread, but you can look up every single team, every single player. And for the NFL, it's going to be, we did it for the NBA, and our new product for the NFL will be out in 30 days. And it's going to be fantastic. It'll break down every single team, every single player. We'll, be tracking all the injuries and all of the matchups every single week. We're going to be giving everyone an adjustment off of what the actual spread is to help them with their gambling and with their matchups, as well as the fantasy players as well. They can look up individual players and make decisions on their lineups. So yeah, thank you very much, Michael. And this is a blast. Let's do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do this again. Thank you, Dr. A, very much. You bring the brains to this. I just sit back and I let you deliver all this amazing information to everyone listening, because really there is no other place like Inside Injuries if you are a sports fan, a sports gambler, a fantasy player. So really you should be utilizing this. But Dr. A, it's been a fun show. It flew by, but it's time to say goodbye already.
Yes. Have a good day, and let's do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Until next week when we get to do all this again, I hope you guys continue to check out Inside Injuries, and best of luck in your bets and to your fantasy teams. And again, we'll be back next week giving you all the latest injury news, and we hope that you join us.